I am Dr. Dexter Todd, and this is my story.
From a policeman to an attorney at law and one of the best rounded legal minds in Guyana and around the Caribbean. The story of Dr. Dexter Todd, in his own words, where it all started and how he was able to excel academically.
Now this journey, academic journey, that is started from a very young age. My first, I think, recognition that I didn't want to only attain just the average qualifications, but I wanted to push myself and to see how far I can push myself academically. That started when I was in primary school, and it was a very rough beginning. And I attended the Vridenoop Primary School, and at that time we had our teacher Marine, and Sir Danny. Sir Danny was our maths teacher. Miss Marine was our class teacher. And then we also had Miss Maraj. I can never forget those early primary school teachers. They saw, I think, very early that there was something special about the way I sought to apply myself. And so they, of course, through lots of disciplinary measures, they tried to ensure that I was sticking to it. I wouldn't say to myself that I was a very quick learner at all. If I were to be quite honest, I think my beginning started very slow. And that is because of the fact that, I was not exposed to a lot of the materials like a lot of the other students. They had the type of resources to push their education, and mine was always a struggle, and that's because of the fact that that you had to work hard to buy everything, and some things my mom could not afford. But that did not stop me at all. That did not stop me at all. I decided at a very young age that I was not going to allow the life of poverty to be my end. And I thought at that time that the way out of poverty was an education. And there was enough around me that demonstrated clearly that poverty is hard, and I did not want that life. And I wanted to apply myself and to push myself. I always say I at every level, I have not yet exhausted not even half of my brain, so I needed to push myself a little more.
Todd's journey to greatness started at the Shirley Field Nursery School, and then he went on to the Vridenoop Primary School, where he wrote the Common Entrance Examination and gained a place at the West Demerara Secondary School. His stay at the West Demerara Secondary School was shortly following a fire that destroyed the school.
So by the time I wrote Common Entrance from the Vridenoop School, my placement was at the West Demerara Secondary School. And I was very excited to go there. My first year there, I met again some teachers that helped me tremendously. I met Miss Grace there. I will never forget her. I met Sir Barrington. And those were, I think, I met Miss Marcia. Miss Marcia was there at the West Demerara School, and those, among other teachers, were very involved in my life. So for that 1 year, I believe that I got the type of moral support that helped me to push even further. And after the West Demerara School was gutted by fire, I thought that going on to my second year, that it was somehow difficult for me to learn at the West Demawara Secondary School, because at that time the only arrangement that could have been made was the arrangement for the half-day session. So my class attended school at 12 o'clock, and about 3:30 thereabout we were out of school, but that was not enough.
As fate would have it, Dr. Todd defied the odds and took it upon himself to get a transfer to a school in the city.
And so at a very young age, I came to Georgetown for the first time myself on Monday morning on the steamer. And I did ask for directions, and I was directed to where the Ministry of Education was. I would consider that I was a very bold child, and I knew from listening to other persons where is it that you have to go to be able to get a transfer. So when I got over to Georgetown and I got to the ministry, I was seated with a number of persons. And of course, those adults were the persons who were going before me, and they were going into this room where a woman who was in charge of the transfers at the time was attending to them. And so when it was my time, I was barred from going into the room because I was told that I was just a child and I needed to bring my parents. But I was very adamant that I needed to talk and to explain to the person my situation. And so I waited again, and being seated, and I waited for some time. And then the lady came out of the room, and I went and I approached her and I spoke to her. And of course, you know, she did ask where my parents were. And I told her that my father is not around, and my mother is working. She is a domestic worker and she's working, and I needed to talk with her. I am glad that she listened because on hearing me, she decided that even though it would have required my parents or a parent to accompany me, she was going to give me a chance. And I remember telling her, and I remember it just as if it was yesterday, I remember telling her that we are very poor, we are struggling so hard, and that I needed an education in order to come out of poverty and to bring my family out of poverty. I never forgot those words. And I believe about the sincerity of how I spoke to her. She assisted me, and she placed me at the St. John's College. And of course, I received a paper which told me what the color of the uniform, and then I asked questions in terms of where the school was, so that I can, of course, attend and find the school. And shortly after, I believe it's about 2 or 3 days, I took to get my uniform together, and then I went all the way to St. John's College. It was, you know, this is a country boy coming to Georgetown, so it was not as as familiar as I would have liked it to be. So it was pretty challenging at first to be able to move from the Stelling, and at that time I only knew Brickdam. So move from the Stelling and to get to the Waterloo Street and so on. Again, I needed, and I received the type of guidance and assistance. Getting to St. John's College. After my second year at St. John's College, that school then was gutted by fire. And that school also went into a half-day session. So it was, of course, not possible for me to go back to the ministry to say, put me in a school which we had double sessions. So I stayed there and I applied myself. But at St. John's College, I met again some of the most, I think, impactful teachers. I met Miss Gibbs. I met Miss Bonita Hunter. I met Mr. Ali. I met, of course, Mr. Brummel. I met one of all of our favorites. I met Miss Polydor. I met Miss Thompson there. Those teachers, I believe, I always have to hold my hats off to them at any given opportunity, because those were teachers who really did assist me to really push myself in academic work. From my fifth form, after the CXC subjects, I then made a request to go to sixth form, and I was given an opportunity to go to the Bishop's High School, and where I sat my CAPE exams, and in that school really was an eye-opener for me, because I met some of the most influential persons who were students at that time. And of course, the teachers, the discipline at the school was a bit higher than where I came from. So, of course, I had no difficulties in adopting. And that is when I met my class teacher at the sixth form level, Miss Daly, who was, I think, one of the warmest teachers one could have found. And then I met also Miss Carlett. Miss Carlett taught us communication studies, and Miss Daly taught us information technology. Those teachers at the Bishop's High School, I think they blew my mind. And I started, I think, from those exposures, even though my situation was one in which financially it was difficult, I think looking and trying to pull from the type of positive influence that I found around me, I think it helped in a very important way to nurture the passion for academic work and education. So by the time I went on to the University of Guyana to do my first degree in international relations, I think the discipline was there, and it assisted me to move on in my academic journey. It was not easy. It was not easy, but there was such a determination that even though I invested, I think, to this stage tremendously into my education, it was because I think the drive was because I wanted to push myself. I wanted to see how far physically, mentally, psychologically, spiritually I can go in the academic field and in the realm. And so pushing myself from my first degree and then into my second degree, which was a bachelor's in law, and then going on to the Wooding Law School, in which I attained my legal educational certificate, which afforded me an opportunity to be admitted to the bars both in Guyana and in Belize. And I was just accepted to be admitted in St. Kitts Nevis, in which I'll be pursuing one of, I think, a very important case in St. Kitts in September. I think that helped me to recognize that it is not where you should stop.
He was admitted to the bar in 2012, but continued to push the bar more than 17 years later, furthering his studies and reaching new heights. Dr. Todd has experience in all law areas and has litigated from admission to the bar to currently over 300 cases. In addition, he is a coach of many young attorneys and law students from both the University of Guyana and the Charisma University.
When I came into the practice of law, I recognized that law was really not a narrow road, and that it was so broad. And the more you open yourself to learning, it created a deeper passion for the for the law and the application of the law. I wanted to make sure that every service that I give to a client is one that comes from a depth, the depth of the knowledge of law, and that I was not just superficially looking at things from a paper, but I wanted to go so far to understand the philosophical underpinning of law and the application of law. And I think you appreciate the law more when you not only read a judgment, when you can understand the philosophy behind the making of a judgment, when you can understand the philosophy of the enactment of laws, and you can understand society, you understand people, you understand proper methods in dealing or creating social order, you understand how vital law is. So I went on to pursue my first Master of Laws, and that been in alternative dispute resolution. I thought that the court moving away from the adversarial type of matters and now encouraging negotiations and mediations and arbitrations and alternative settlements of matters in a whole. I thought that this was something that Guyana needed, and of course I would be very knowledgeable in the area when my clients, when it comes to my clients. So I did of course, my first master's at the Charisma University. That journey was very intense, very intense. And I thought that why stop now? I have already at that time made a pledge to myself that I was going to go as far as my doctorate. And so I thought that, all right, I was not ready at that time because I was not sure at that time which area that I was going to focus on, because there are about 3 areas in which I believed that my passion was taking me. And so I said, you know something, I'm going to go on to do a second master. And at that time I saw the Cumbria University, and I thought that my research on that university in London was a university in which a number of persons in the legal fraternity, both in Canada and in London, would have gone through. So I thought that it would be very good when I look at the resume of some of the facilitators in that program. I thought that it would be very good to draw some of the knowledge coming from them. So I then pursued my second Master of Laws in international business law. Now, of course, Guyana was moving to the area of oil and gas, and I thought that this is an opening for a number of trade negotiations. This was an opening for a number of handling of very large contracts at an international level. And I thought, again, when we have clients coming from all different walks of life and all different countries, there needs to be that wealth of knowledge in the area. And I thought that instead of pushing myself into oil and gas, I may want to go a little wider. And I went to international business law. Now, after completing that master's, there was, I think, one client who encouraged me to go into a particular area of studies in which there can be very strong competence. We had I believe it's in 2019 or thereabout, we had this alleged Ponzi scheme matter where people were saying, you know, it was one of the big highlights in Guyana at the time. And I thought that this matter introduced a number of areas in which my research taught me that there were not a whole lot of competence in the area at the time. I am of the belief that we have to be of assistance to the court. And that caused me or propelled me to go into doing a third, this time Master of Science in Fraud and Risk Management at Stalford University in Manchester, London. Now, this particular discipline opened my training and my intellect to a number of areas, including bitcoins, including risk management, frauds moving from various levels through the banks and all types of organizations. But more importantly, there was a very higher learning in the issues of money laundering and the issues to a very limited degree of terrorist financing. It was at that stage in 2019, while pursuing that master's, that I was sure that the discipline that I want to focus on for my doctorate was terrorist financing, because the idea of ensuring that the area was so wide and ensuring that there was such a person or persons or adding to persons who were so competent in the areas in not only in Guyana but in the Caribbean, I believe was encouraging. Again, I did my groundwork, and I recognize that this specialization was not widely of course received at the various levels, and that you only found that the persons with this type of specializations came from a particular types of countries, especially for those who are employed with the United Nations, who hold such qualifications. So again, I believe that this was a golden opportunity for me to add to the richness of our country, to add to the richness of the Caribbean. And so I decided I was going to pursue my doctorate and focus on terrorism and counterterrorism. And what an interesting time. The completion of this doctorate came at a time in which Guyana is preparing to have amendments in our anti-money laundering laws, and to have a number of changes. We now see that there's likely to be an expansion of how we treat cryptocurrencies and so forth. And I thought that this was the ideal time for me to have such exposure through the academic studies in these areas, so that my contributions to the courts and my clients and the country will be of a very high service. And so, while it was costly right through, I believe it was worth it. It was worth it. It meant that for over 5 years, I think I had completely given up my weekends. There was no Friday evenings, Saturday, Sunday. It was all work. All my evenings was taken up. They were all taken up with research and writing, and it was a sacrifice. But I promise to make sure that Guyana continues to be very proud, and that the sacrifice that I made will go in the future to benefit the further development of our country.
He spoke of his time in the Guyana Police Force, and he says he would not trade those years for anything.
It has taught me quite a lot of discipline. It has taught me to not look at things and make judgment, because sometimes what you see and how it appears is not really what it is. And so that, I believe, I have had an opportunity to see that in a very practical sense. My time in the Guyana Police Force, I think, was also rewarding because it opened my understanding to various areas of law. So by the time I became an attorney at law, I think the application of the court system, particularly in the criminal arena, was very easy for me to adopt because, of course, my exposure to law enforcement gave me an appreciation from the get-go of the law. And I think that is why I'm so passionate and I am so sometimes very open about police's violations of persons' rights, police breaching protocols, police going against very long recognized standing orders. Those things, of course, bring a sense of worry to me, but because of the fact that I know where I came from, and the fact that I know that the training and the discipline is there. So when you see that level of deviation, you get worried. Because we always need to keep in mind that our service is to our people. And when we're serving our people, we need to serve them at the very highest level. And so all of that coming together, I think, helped to build very strong character in me as an attorney. And so I applied that type of attitude and training to my studies. I think that it is not all, will not all be said if I did not give you what I consider the pinnacle of the pinnacle, and that is a strong faith. I think that is the foundation of who made me and who I am today, is because of my strong faith and trust in God. And that was, of course, passed down from a very strong believer, my mother, who believed that prayer and dedication and submissions to the will of God can take you far. And I think I have been able to pull all my life's experiences together, and it helped to shape me into what I believe my purpose is at this given season.